right, you know that I'm often talking about an engine failure on takeoff. My video that's coming out this week as we shoot this is actually how to practice an engine failure on takeoff. Well, Bill, he's my neighbor here at Bowling Field. He actually had an engine failure on takeoff just a couple of days ago. So we're going to talk about it. Stick with us on FlyWire. Hey, I'm Scott Perdue, and today on FlyWire, we're going to talk to Bill James. He's my neighbor here at Bowling for a lot of years, and he has an award-winning Varieties that he built himself. And he recently bought a Kolb
Mark III Extra,
and he just experienced an engine failure on takeoff, right after takeoff, and successfully landed in a field. We're going to talk to him about it today. So, Bill, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into flying?
Well, I went into flying in the Marine Corps. I didn't go in the Marine Corps to fly, but I passed all the wickets and worked out good and successfully defended Hawaii and Japan for a number of years. And
one interesting thing is we were both stationed at Iwakuni, Marine Corps Air Station in Iwakuni, Japan, at the same time. Of course, I wasn't in helicopters, and I wasn't an officer, so I would never have done it. But anyway.
Well, I'm glad we did now. Well, flew in the Marine Corps, and then had several commercial flying jobs after that. I herded cattle with helicopters down in the ranches in South Texas. And I worked in the screwworm eradication program, which was highly successful. We used irradiated screwworms to take care of a serious fly problem down in South Texas. And then I realized I did not want a flying job. I wanted an airplane. And I had bought the plans for the Very Easy in 1975 when it came out. And when I turned 40, I realized yesterday I was 20, tomorrow I'm going to be 60, so I better get going. So I started building the Very Easy, and it changed my life. Because of the people that I met, I became an instructor at American Airlines in the simulator. And then I got pulled into the F-35 program as a lowly English major helicopter pilot who was some of the finest fighter pilots in the world. And worked there 15 years, saw the first nut go on the first bolt on the F-35, and then saw it go into combat in Israel for the first time. And the Very Easy has been a significant factor for a number of years. I learned a lot. I knew nothing. I was not a mechanic. There was an airport, a grass strip 5 miles from where I grew up. I never knew that until I was about 30. I missed a major opportunity there to get immersed into that. Didn't know about it. Built a Very Easy. Came to know a number of friends. One of my friends bought a Very Easy, and I helped him. And I noticed that he had a Kolb, so I bought one. He was getting an immense utility and enjoyment out of that airplane. And it's all side by side, place to place. So I found one, and when I got it, it had like a good stack of the plans, and I went through the plans. I said, okay, this is how this works, etc. So I just immersed myself in it. So there were annual inspection checklists from 2 years, and they had gone through and checked off everything and made comments on the annual inspection, 3 or 4 pages each. So I went through those, and then I did an annual inspection on the airplane when I got it. Why should I trust this cable? How does this cable actually? What is the swaging requirement? What am I looking for? Why should I trust this cable now? When should I not trust it? And as far as flying, it's a tail wheel. I had a Cessna 120 at one point, but they're not related. This one is large tires, long fuselage, and simple tail wheel operation, which I like that. And after talking with my friend who has one, and then a couple of other people, and then one man from the factory, here's what I knew. I knew that on final, You want to climb at 55, but on final, you want to have at least 60. That's why I'm sitting here. That one thing. So what happened, I have gotten slower. I've had the airplane about 3 years. I have gotten slower than 60 on final. And there is, at 60, everything's wonderful. You go in this cushion, it floats, you pull the power off, and it just settles right in. If you're at 50, it drops. I don't know what that is. I don't know why. I don't know if it's ground effect or some kind of flow. But I know, I heard beforehand, and I know from experience, you want 60 miles an hour. So as we were taking off, it was about a 30-second flight. As we were taking, I had a friend with me from France that I met 2 hours before, and he had never been in a small airplane. And when we got out of the airplane in the field, he thought this was normal.
Hey, this is part of the demo.
Yeah.
That's part of the ride.
Yes.
This is cool.
So anyway, I told him as we were climbing out, okay, I want 55, and I had just done that as we were climbing out, and the engine started. I started losing altitude. I immediately turned because I knew I couldn't make the end of the runway. Immediately turned, and the turn was sketchy. So I immediately pushed the nose over and made sure that I had the 60. There were some trees, maneuvered through the trees, and got right down to the ground, closer than was comfortable, and then flared. And then just scooted across, and no damage to the airplane.
No damage to the airplane. No damage to the people. That's a double success.
60 miles.
60 miles an hour.
And when you turn, your lift vector shrinks drastically. So you gotta have the forward stick with the turn. I've written several articles on engine failure on takeoff. And the article I read that stimulated me was the author said the normal Cessna 150 pilot in a Cessna 150 with an engine failure at 400 feet does not have the mental ability to push the nose over far enough. They don't realize how much physical effort it's going to take when you sag, and then to get the nose over so you got airspeed. Now, an interesting thing about the very easy, long easy, cozy, those aircraft, as you know, they will come to a minimum speed and then not stall. You're already at full back step. And so you don't want to fly there. That's not normal flight, but that's, in fact, a huge safety factor. If you lose the engine, you have to get the nose over on takeoff, or if you're close to it, you have to get the nose over quickly because you need 22 miles an hour above, say that minimum speed is 62 miles an hour. You need 22 more miles an hour to flare. And that was the wonderful thing that I felt was as I was nosing the Kolb in, and I flew it, fly all the way through the emergency. And that was
Hoover said fly as far as the crash as possible.
Yeah. And that was 60 and fly there. Anyway,
that's awesome.
So the very easy, you need 22 miles an hour to dissipate the rate of descent. And there are any airplane where you don't have that ability and you don't have control of the airplane. So that was my major concern, was to fly the airplane all the way through, even if I had to hit bounce, lay a tree down or something, whatever. But fortunately, I had my initial turn. As soon as it sputtered, I turned. And I said, okay, that looks good. And I said, I'll look around if I can. But that looks good.
That's such an excellent choice to me. The first thing that happens is I really like the fact that you didn't go, well, I want to turn back to the airplane. Go, well, I don't have the energy. You already knew innately that you didn't have the energy to turn back. That was a terrible idea. So you picked a spot. Then if you can make it, in other words, the engine's producing enough power to keep you airborne, so you can go back, great. But if it's not, I'm going to land here.
This looks good.
Yeah, this is a good place. Yeah, that's awesome.
20 years ago, Claudine and I were flying to Atlanta, and the very easy had the engine quit. And it turned out to be the bolt that retains the gear on the crankshaft to the mags. So I was climbing through 7,500 feet at 150 miles an hour, and it quit. And I had just put my hand on the section in those days. And I said, okay, there's two lakes that look like V's. I'm on this one, and it quit. And I looked here and I said, that's where I'm going. I could have changed, but I said, that's where I'm going. And Claudine said, what's going on? I said, well, I'm not sure, but we're going to land and have breakfast and see what's going on. So I followed that major highway to a little town, Mineola, and it had two airports, and all the doors were closed on one of them, and they were all open on the other one. So I thought I was going to have to do high key, low key, which you can mess up. But I just 1,500 feet, 1,000 feet, 110, I kept the electric speed, hopped over a fence and landed, and with no thrust, I didn't even have to use the brakes. We rolled about halfway down the runway, and a guy came over in a golf cart and said, howdy folks, ma'am, would you like a soda? So they go down to the clubhouse and get some sodas. I pushed the airplane up. Anyway, on that one, we glided 26 miles.
That's a long way.
50 minutes, which is way too much time to mess something up. But I knew 100 miles an hour. I knew that.
So that was your glide speed? Best glide speed?
Best glide. I knew that for a long time. And fortunately, the crankshaft was turning the whole time. The propeller was freewheeling, so there was no drag. And my heart rate never changed. Because I was at an airport in Springs here in South Fort Worth that had no tower. I would come in and do quite a bit of flying at idle. And every time I at least came downwind at idle and made the turn here or here or here, depending on the wind. And then I'd come in all without power.
So you practiced an engine out.
So I had hundreds of...
And this was in the air.
Yes. I had hundreds of power-off landings. And so Claudine said, are you concerned when the engine quit? I said, not yet. Everything's okay so far. Airplane, they changed my life. And, it's fortunately part of the fun is to be prepared. That's a lot of fun. And living around you guys, it's a good thing.
Okay. Well, that's a tremendous story. But it's also, it's like double your money here that we get your engine failure from altitude and how you plan that out. I think, I just want to recap real quick. For the very least, best glide's 100 miles an hour. And you said you needed to have 22 over, I think you said 62.
Yeah, minimum speed.
So you needed 84 as the minimum speed, minimum approach speed. So you can fly.
And that's primarily when you're making an unprepared off-field landing, you want at least that 22 miles an hour.
Well, the Beechcraft that makes this airplane, they recommend 81 knots as the minimum engine approach speed. Men's sink speed is actually closer to 76, which is a big difference. But the difference in speed at 81 knots, you have enough energy to fly. At 76, you have no energy at all. So it's the same issue you're talking about, but it's not that 22 miles an hour is a big number. And
there's a lot of things that you can think about that are not productive.
during the
during the emergency or during the when you're not doing, when you're having to do something you don't want to do. And I was, now one of the main thoughts that I have looking back is that airplane did not want to do what it had to do. I had to make it. And when I initially turned and it felt sketchy.
So you're talking about the Kolb.
The Kolb.
Yeah.
I think the normal drill is engine failure, sag, drop a wing, and spin. I think that's what.
I totally agree with you, and this is actually one of my soapboxes, is because I see a lot of people climbing for 1,000 feet or more at VX. If you have an engine failure VX, you stall. I mean, there's no other way. You stall. I'm not a big fan of VY either, because VY, any time your reaction, we're humans, so reaction time is about 3 to 5 seconds. In this airplane, you lose 10 knots in 3 seconds. That's pretty fast. So if you're at VX, you're going to stall. If you're at VY, you're going to get close. You're still going to be above the stall, but you're going to get close. And I'm a fan of cruise climb. It's very common in bananas. And cruise climb in this airplane is actually 107, but it's easy to read 110. So that's generally what I use, and I'm a huge fan of that, because here's the thing, and this is a perennial argument between VY, which gets you altitude, and energy. Cruise climb is energy. Velocity. Velocity is the square of is velocity squared, that's how much energy you get. And the equation of potential energy. And potential energy for altitude is linear. So it's times height, linear. So you have more energy with a higher speed than you do with a higher altitude. And frankly, the difference between VY and cruise climb may be 100 feet. That's nothing. Especially when you live there, high level airplane like this. So I think you did a great job. Absolutely fantastic job.
It gives you a lot of things to think about. I saw an accident one time where the pilot was surprised right in the middle of the runway, could not make it back to the runway. Looking back, he couldn't have. So his option was straight ahead. There was a road over there. There was a field. He tried to make it back to the runway. And he basically turned, sliding down, knife edged into it.
And then curved.
Yeah. And he could have landed straight ahead and mushed into some trees. He could have tried for the road. He could have turned 90 degrees into that field like I did. Or he could have he could have pushed the nose over and just taken whatever he got. But I heard people saying that he locked up. He mentally and physically locked up to make it back to the field.
Yeah.
But he wasn't thinking.
He wasn't thinking anymore. I've got to do this. This is the only thing I can do.
And on the Kolb, there was a very particular point where I thought, okay, wings level. So I was ahead of there. I was not ahead. I was right with the airplane in the descent. But as far as the wings level, I got that in early. But I had the option.
Yeah.
And so you're able to fly the airplane. I can imagine how horrible it must be to not be able to control the plane because you got too slow.
Then you don't have load anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're just along for the ride. And it's not a great ride.
So it's a like I said, the airplane does not want to do what it needs to do, and so we need to be prepared on that particular airplane to do the one thing that works.
That's great. Thanks for sharing the story. Both of them, actually. That's great.
I got one. No,
I've got two. So there you have it. This is a great example of engine failure on takeoff. So if you didn't see my video from last week, you can't practice this maneuver for real with a landing. My video last week, you haven't seen it, but I haven't told you about it. But I advocate practicing the maneuver, but not the landing. Just the turn back, because you try to land, you're maneuvering close to the ground, close to a stall, bad things can happen. So I'm not in favor of that. I don't believe in giving ourselves an emergency just to see something. So my nickel on the grass here is that we practice the turn back, because then you see the picture. And I think like the fellow that you saw try to turn back, if he had practiced it to see that the turn back's not going to work, that there's an altitude and speed you have to have. If you don't have those gates, I call them safety gains, then you don't even try it. 90 degrees, as you did, that's the choice. So that's the video from last week, so go watch that.
I have one other comment.
Yeah.
When we call ATIS here, and it's 102 degrees, and they say it's 4,200 feet density altitude in the envelope of air over the runway, it's 139 degrees and 8,500 feet density altitude for your propeller, for your carburetor, for all the things that for your passenger. Everything there is at 139 degrees. And you're not going to get the performance you expect for 4,200 feet above sea level.
Definitely not. Density altitude is a big thing. Whole other topic for a future video.
You bet.
So there you have it. If you like the video, hit like and subscribe. It looks like that up there. And I'd also like to thank my Patreon supporters. And these guys right here, without them, I couldn't make it much harder to do these videos. Thanks a lot. And if you'd like to support the channel, I'll leave a link down below for the FlyWire Patreon page. Meanwhile, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on FlyWire. All right?
Good.
Wasn't so bad, was it?
No, you good.
Did we pass muster?